For the Life of the World is a production of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture. Visit us online at faith.yale.edu.
You're listening to For the Life of the World. I'm Evan Rosa with the Yale Center for Faith and Culture. Today's episode is part 3 of a 5-part book club series. It's produced and hosted by Kelly Corrigan. The PBS host and author of 4 New York Times bestselling memoirs is taking a deep dive into the latest book from the Yale Center for Faith and Culture. It's written by Miroslav Volf, Matt Croasmun, and Ryan McAnnally-Linz. And it's called Life Worth Living, A Guide to What Matters Most. And this book is based on a Yale College course that's been taught for about 10 years. It's taken up some of the most pressing questions of life, but it doesn't keep those implications and challenges, perplexity, the demands of those questions far away, at arm's length. Both the course and the book invite lifelong learners to look into these questions up close, asking for any given idea, if that idea were true, how would your life have to change? And as the cover of the book says, your life is too important to be guided by anything less than what matters most. And so here we are in this episode where Kelly continues a podcast book club with 2 of her really cool friends. Kate Bowler is the host of the Everything Happens podcast and associate professor of American religious history at Duke Divinity School. And they're also joined by the wonderful actress Claire Danes, who starred in the Showtime series Homeland, as well as something I remember from my teens, the 90s MTV hit series, My So-Called Life. And if you're interested in reading along with Kelly, Kate, and Claire, please visit lifeworthlivingbook.com. That's where you can find links to buy the book, as well as a free discussion guide when you sign up for the Life Worth Living email list. Thanks for listening, friends. Enjoy the continuation of this book club as they discuss life worth living.
Welcome back to Kelly Corrigan Wonders. I'm Kelly Corrigan, and today I am back together with my book club buddies, Claire Danes and Kate Bowler. Claire is an Emmy and Golden Globe winning actress and a wonderful thinker. Kate Bowler is a podcaster and a professor and a best-selling author. She's also a great friend of mine. And today we're discussing things like envy, what's worth doing, what's worth wanting, how a good life should feel, and which beliefs each of us struggle with most mightily. I love book clubbing with these 2 because it allows me to deliver on what I think of as the promise of Kelly Corrigan Wonders, which is a place for people who like to laugh while they think, a place for people who believe that knowing more and feeling more might help us do more and be better. So I welcome you to round up a book club of your own, spend some time with the book Life Worth Living, and then join us for this series. All right, let's dig in. All right, we're back, and I have an opening thought, which is sometimes I feel jealous of people who are naturally skinny. I just want to admit it. Mm-hmm. I also feel very jealous as a writer of people who have been touched by Oprah's magic wand. Mm-hmm. Just seems like that would be so great. And people often think I have. They're like, well, you were a book club pick. And
I thought you were.
And sometimes I just let that go.
You do kind of have an aura
you do have
of somebody who would have been.
Oprah bonus features.
Mm-hmm. Oprah.
Yeah.
No?
Oprah, talk to me, baby.
1, can she hear you now? 2, you haven't been?
No.
Oh, I made that up.
Yeah, but just to spread it.
I won't stop telling people.
How does envy show up in your life? Mm-hmm. Cop to it.
Yeah, all right. This is actually one of the glitches in my personality is I don't feel envious about normal stuff.
Okay.
Whenever someone does something really amazing, I always think like, wow, good for you, because simultaneously like, oh, I could never do that. That's so amazing. So it does feel, that part feels easy. The part that feels gross and makes me full of rage is people who feel like they're in control of their lives, people who boast about really lovely things they should be able to be happy about, but I know they weren't in charge of. And then I start to feel angry, like, here's my bazillion grandkids. I'm like, well, good for you. Everybody lived. I'm so happy for you. And then I get into like a, even if they're just happy, it always feels a bit like gloating, even though I should just let people have it. Part of me gets very county.
County. That's a good word.
The second I'm running math, then that's envy.
That's right.
And and people who feel like they're in control of their like health and working out. I love working out, but I'm so constantly debilitated by problems I can't fix. And then I'm like, well, you just did a 0 to 5K. I'm so happy for you. So I get very...
Is that your favorite Peloton instructor? Yeah. I love her.
It's incredible. It's just determination.
When I'm not having diarrhea.
Yeah, I do. I think I mostly get really jealous of control narratives because I crave it so much. And then
what do you do with it? Like, do you have a technique?
Oh, don't worry. It mostly turns like a blade where I just hold the dagger by the blade and I just ram it into my own sweetheart. Yeah. So mostly I just use it as my own frustration. But sometimes it just mostly makes me feel like an alien. So it feels kind of more like embarrassment, which isn't. I wouldn't pick that for someone else, but that's kind of where I go.
Yeah. Envy is miserable, isn't it? And it's unavoidable. And sometimes it flares. I mean, sometimes I'm more vulnerable to it than others. And it has everything to do with how fulfilled I am and how stable or comfortable I am. And it can be a real surprise when it suddenly becomes aggravated. And it's never really about the person that I seem to be envying. But I'm persuaded by the illusion every time, but it's always feedback about what is kind of kinky or misaligned within myself or what I'm wanting but feel at a remove from for whatever reason. I mean, that's very vague, but
it's a great interpretation though. It's a great exercise to run is like, there's probably another day where you could come across this fact about someone else and think, good for you. And so it's like, what's the difference between that day and this day?
Right.
And the difference is something internal.
And it goes quickly to shame too, right? Like I don't have that thing because I am deficient or and just not enough or uninvited or unwanted. And that is deeply unpleasant and also something that I think we've all encountered on a daily basis, but
and sometimes I can't tell if it's anger too because I'm not quick enough to recognize anger.
Right.
But sometimes envy should actually just be rage. Like, oh, actually you took that belonged to me.
Right.
'Cause sometimes things do belong to us.
But I recognize what you were saying too about people that I envy. It's like they have a veneer of kind of glibness or it's just all just, I don't know. It's not my fault.
That's so crazy.
Hey, it just happened. And you go,
but the book's super concerned with like what's worth doing and what's worth wanting.
Yes.
And sometimes I feel like one of the reveals of envy is that it shows you something that may or may not be worth your time and desire. Where it's like, oh, okay. So you just glanced at her Instagram followers or you just found out that she won Podcast of the Year. And then you have to double back and you have to land somewhere that's more stable and say, is that what I'm doing? Is that the game I'm playing? Wait a second. That's not like a worthy game.
Right.
What's the game? The game is like produce great content, make things you're proud of, try to be useful, whatever it is, whatever desire puts you in the position you're in. Already, you have to like reconnect to it. And that often makes it fall because it just doesn't stand up to the scrutiny of like.
I think too, one of the groups that I see envy in most that really deserve it is in all the people who like it. If you get to order all their loves, it's not like a misaligned love. It's a love they don't get to realize at all. Like caregivers are in that position all the time. We meet people all the time who have to forfeit their dreams for other people. And in those versions, like they could die of envy. I mean, it just withers a thing that could have been beautiful in them. But they're like, well, like someone needs to take care of this person.
Right.
And I admire when people can hold the weight of envy with dignity.
Yeah.
Because I know that even any unrealized potential in me makes me feel itchy and crazy and nuts. And to see people have to live with it for years and years, and they have like, it's like they've managed to like compress it into some kind of grace. I admire that more than I can say.
Like the dreams deferred thing where you're just totally putting someone else first. But at least in that instance, I hope people have a greater sense of satisfaction, that they're in pursuit of something worthy. Like it is utterly worthy.
I don't think they feel that at all, Kelly.
You don't?
I don't think so. I think they get glimmers every now and then where they're like, gosh, I'm a really good person who feels haggard and tired and shriveled by my own altruism. I do. I think for the most part, it's like imaginary math that if they do the right thing, that they get the benefit of like the accrual of these wonderful feelings. But I think they rarely feel satisfaction.
Well, maybe that's true. It'd be really interesting to hear from listeners about that. I'm sure so many people who are listening to this right now are in a caregiver position one way or another, of their choosing, not of their choosing.
Right.
Yeah.
But a feeling I have after being with my dad at the end of his life, which was a very short period of service, very short, was I'll always have that. When I look back and when I think about him, I'll always have that ending. And that is very soothing to me. And so I hope for people who are caring for their parents and older folks that in the middle of it, it feels like one thing, but the final feeling, the lasting feeling is I did right by a person I love.
Yeah. But that's also a choice that you made too. I mean, that's a really critical distinction. You know, service that is expected of you is, prescripted and service that you're, invested in giving. And that, is going to feed you and nourish you directly and personally.
Yeah. Like chosen suffering.
Yeah.
Versus,
there was a beautiful book, the author will now forget, and that will annoy me, but it was talking about meaning making as a kind of final stage of grief. And I thought that was in this version, I do think we feel like when we feel the coherence of our own beliefs and almost like the lift we get from having like truly been ourselves in some deep way, that can be really, really satisfying and justify all kinds of costs.
Right.
But it does, I don't know, it feels like it's this, I always imagine it's like a bonus feature that some people get and other people only get glimmers of.
Yes.
But for the most part, that doing the right thing will probably feel bad.
Well, that's interesting because it takes you to this other big, big section of the book, which is another thing I'd never thought about. It's like, what should life feel like? And I think it's huge experience for us to come to terms with that and to share that widely with especially our children. This friend of mine, Tracy Tuttle, is a therapist. So my best friend is also a therapist. It's an incredibly handy thing.
Yep.
And she was printing something off at the printer the last time I was visiting her. And I was like, hey, what's that? I'm always like, hey, what do you got for me? And it was this thing. She had a younger client, and it was a series of smiley faces to frowns. And there were maybe like 9 expressions on this handout. And then there was a ... dash line that cordoned off the middle 3. So it was like neutral, feeling kind of good, feeling kind of bad. And I said, what is this? And she said, I just use it with the younger people, as if they're the only people that need to know this, to say, this is really where we live. We live in the middle. Most days, hopefully, most days are in this zone, which is to say, it is not a problem to be fixed if you are not way up here in elated or ecstatic. There will be potentially as many elated, ecstatic days as there are rage and resentment. And that your goal is to kind of operate within this band. And that was sort of marrying that to the book, which says that, like, does a good life include only pleasant experiences and no pain? And what are the benefits of feeling the whole tilt-a-wheel of emotions?
Well, right now I'm in this like enforced hiatus because, I am compromised with child. And there's, when I'm totally immersed in really tough work, of course, I'm just desperately pining for a reprieve from that. And it's always kind of crushing to realize that just kind of wide open days of meandering through one pleasant experience to another is actually incredibly irritating and stressful. It's pressure filled, actually. And I guess as a mom too, I always want my children to be safe and at ease, which is not the desirable state, actually. That's not what they want or need necessarily. I'm like compulsive about delivering that to them and for them. And they actually really benefit enormously from some grit and some obstacles and, you know, an opportunity to be a little afraid and to struggle and push against their limitations and be genuinely unsure if they're going to, you know, manage it.
Yeah, it's like a low growth state. Like rest and reprieve and safety is kind of low growth.
Right.
But then, you know, there's times.
But, I mean, you need both. But it's just kind of negotiating those two tensions, I guess, constantly.
I think I've overcorrected on that too. I partly because I was so worried when Zach was little that I was going to be sick and that it was going to be miserable. And so I made a really thick bubble around like, this is the safe and wonderful and now fun place. And this is the place where we have friends and family all the time and everyone is at your disposal.
Yeah.
I had to go to a funeral a couple days ago and I really just should have brought him. And I feel so protective around pain and I think I should be graduating out of that. But it's funny. I do really believe that my life should be sort of difficult and terrible in a way that I don't even know if I should believe in. Yeah. But I've always thought that, like the work should be really, really hard. And if it's only medium hard, then I'm probably doing it wrong. So I have a way of taking almost everything and making it unbelievably hard. Like maybe it could have been great if I decided to take 2 years to write it, but like, no, we'll get it done in 4 months.
Right.
It'll be grueling. Tears will be shed. But I do think I have such a low value on my own suffering is the word. And that's had some really good parts. But I can tell that I don't believe that for anyone else. I do think that they should have like greater richness and more agility to move up and down, like joy to sorrow. But I think I've just been hanging out at the bottom end of the spectrum for a bit too long. Yeah. And I can tell I'm trying to push out of it. I've noticed like I did beekeeping last week with my friend Ed, and I signed up to go visit my friend's shark lab next month. And I just want a shark. I want a shark so hard. But I can already tell I'm feeling like ripples of weird because it's not in my natural tendencies to like move toward joy.
I'm thinking about like your favorite emotional states.
Yes.
Like I love laughing. I love connecting. Like this is kind of a favorite emotional state right now for me.
Angst. Yeah.
But I love like helping somebody I love put their finger on something, like when they're like, that's it. Like the word I love to get back is exactly. That's exactly it. It's like very satisfying to help someone find the nut of the thing that's making them crazy. Like, what's your favorite feeling? What state do you find yourself working toward? Or are you aware of yourself working towards some kind of emotional state that you love?
Yeah, I think we're wired so similarly, Kelly. I do love like discovery. I love it in a classroom. I love it in a book. I love it in people when they just, it's like the point right after you kind of know what you're going to say. And then there's like a little shimmery magic lift. Yeah. You're like, that's it. Word or phrase or that. I could just live off that forever.
Yeah, I would say connection for sure. I had breakfast with my bestie and we were heading to yoga. I mean, that's a perfect morning. And we were just walking from one enjoyable experience to another. And she was talking about whatever she was talking about on the sidewalk. And I was just so overwhelmed with happiness. And I just hugged her and started crying. And I said, I love you so much. But, you know, I think it's, that deep connection, whatever form that takes and whatever moment that is. And that actually exists on set too. And if I feel really embedded in a company and we're all in a shared kind of flow, that's a really great thrill. And probably when I'm doing work and I feel really like secure and animated and free. And again, it's that sort of flow state. And I feel kind of energized to riff, and I'm able to surprise myself. And then that's bliss. And that doesn't happen all that often. That's what you really work hard to arrive at. But that kind of weightlessness.
Yes.
And
That's a perfect word.
Yeah. But I feel that, you feel like when you tuck your kids in and just, their smell and that, that's, yeah.
I get headaches sometimes, and the feeling, as soon as the headache ends, like the release from the oppression of pain is way better than whatever it feels like on an ordinary day to not be afflicted.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels spiritual almost.
Oh my God. I'm like, I am alive again. Like I just come in and say, I'm back. Eddie, I'm back. What do you want to do? Open. Like, I'm here.
Yeah.
So there's something about the reminder that this isn't a guaranteed state.
Yeah.
And then being allowed back in to a healthy point of view is like, ah! Coming up next, Claire, Kate, and I discuss attunement and how well or not well we're integrating the greater truths of the world into our lives. We'll be right back with Kelly Corrigan Wonders. Welcome back to Kelly Corrigan Wonders. I'm Kelly Corrigan, and I'm talking today with actress Claire Danes and professor, podcaster, and author Kate Bowler. Miroslav, who I love listening to, said that his sense of what a good life should feel like is that you would be attuned to the truth of the world. Which goes to like whatever emotions you have about the whole of it.
Right.
Rather than your own internal state.
Yes.
So like the Buddhists say, the feeling of enlightenment is better than pleasure. It's a more appropriate response to the human condition. Oscar Wilde says sorrow is holy because it's in touch with the suffering of the world. To be sad is to be rightly attuned to the world. How is integrating the greater truths of the world going for you?
Okay, so I just when
How's it going, girls?
When I read the Oscar Wilde, kind of celebration of suffering, I understand what he means. But I remembered when I was younger, I had a boyfriend who did really struggle with depression, and he was talking about that, and I said, but I kind of love that feeling of sorrow or sadness. There's real kind of pleasure in that. And he said, then you've never been depressed. And
right,
that was
like
really
melancholy.
Yeah, it was an interesting correction. And I was very chastened by that and grateful for that insight because, it's almost like how we were kind of contextualizing service, right? If you can find meaning in it, if it feels voluntary and, then there's real value in it. And if it feels imposed upon you, then it can be really awful and suffocating. So I think there's so many different kinds of grief, right? Or, a kind of negative feeling. And if there's something to discover within it, if you feel active within it, then that can be beautiful. But if it's an assault or if it kind of makes you small and limited, then it's a real problem.
Yeah, if you're like pinned down by it.
Yeah.
A thing I think sometimes is if I'm, say, spinning with anxiety about something that one of my kids is feeling or doing, the only way to get into a different position relative to that emotion is to say, oh, I'm one of the mothers right now who's worrying about their children. And then I'm connected to all the other mothers in the whole wide world.
And it provides some
who
relief.
are worrying about the children. And then I think, oh, well, then I'm just one of us today.
Yes.
Today I'm in the 40%, that 40%. And tomorrow I'm going to be in the 22% of mothers who are kind of oblivious and don't know what they're up to. And then the next day I'm going to be in the 12% of mothers who are like insanely proud of what their kids are up to today. And to depersonalize it, to be less Kelly and more woman.
Right.
is huge
but
relief
you
for
can
me.
find the escape route, right? There's an out.
Yeah.
So again, like there's mobility there.
Yes.
So, and I think of it because I've
Mobility and
agency,
the key,
right?
Yeah.
But I'm very interested in how people operate in the human condition. That's why I do what I do. And I'm really interested in pathology, right? And the difference between somebody who's eccentric and somebody who's mad is that, the eccentric person is taking pleasure in their colorful expression or whatever, their idiosyncrasy or their funny inclinations. But somebody who's suffering from a real pathology is unhappy. There's an unhappiness and there's a feeling of there's a rigidity. You're mired in something. You're stuck. I was watching a woman on the train who was clearly unwell, and I don't know, God, I really wanted to play her, right? Because I wanted to understand her. But she was on a loop. Like she was talking to two people, literally one to the right and one to the left, and it was nonsensical. But she was just going ricocheting back and forth between these two imaginary conversations, and it was just such an amazing example of, I think, how mental illness can operate. Like it's just circuited, and it makes your life very small, your experience very small. And that's a problem that needs to be fixed, right? That there's some dysfunction, there's some disorder, and just pain or disappointment or fear. Like these are all vital. They're informative and they're enriching, and you can really make something good of them, So
I was thinking of Homeland and your character, and
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking
how
too.
much you must have had to think about this. Like, where is she at any moment in this scale? Because she was in some ways using her disability to her advantage, and then it would take her away.
Yeah, well, I find bipolar disorder really riveting. It develops over time. There's an arc to it, and there's a certain point when you really are like flying, when you are you have these superpowers, but then invariably, it becomes disorganized thinking, and you can't sustain that heightened state. And a lot of times people are rewarded for their mania and they get promoted, but then they're overstimulated and, they capsize, and it's cyclical, but they get addicted to their own illness, and it's hard for them to stay on the drugs. But anyway, it's really, really, really interesting. But yeah, I think, Oscar Wilde's definition of suffering, we should be really clear about what category that is, right? It's a clean suffering. It's a,
People make I think in a usually exhaustingly simplistic way, be like, well, pain is necessary, but suffering is optional. The suffering being the story about the story about the pain and that. And I like the idea that we can have, if we can somehow get enough perspective, that we can try to massage and move around this story we have about what's happening to us, so that like we can manage suffering in some way. It's almost like I wish there was like a spectrum on the word suffering in our ability to even just like tell a story about it. Because I mean, when there's like catastrophic undoing, I meet people all the time where they're like, and I lost my child, and now every version of my love just goes to the very bottom of a well, and every story I know how to tell about myself is just I can't undo it from the story of every bit of beautiful things in my life. And I think no amount of massaging that story is going to undo the like deeply bodily way in which this mom loves her kid now gone. But I do hope that like in the way that we think about suffering, I think maybe first when we normalize it, when we just say, like we become more absurdly honest about things, especially in America, like things that we can't change. In our, Kelly knows I get really bananas about the everything is possible culture, and everything is possible does tell a lie about suffering. Also, I really resent all philosophical and religious worldviews that say that we can eradicate our experience of suffering and only endure intermittent pain.
Right.
I think that is wildly misleading because every version I've ever seen of someone trying to escape suffering, they're mostly just practicing a form of pre-death. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking of like monks I know. Priests I know. They put on a certain outfit. They take on spiritual practices. They live in communities or not. And they sort of like rehearse their own deaths by having given up things in advance. Like they don't get married. They don't have kids. They give up. Like I'm always like, hey, what are your main promises? Because they have slightly different variations of the same thing. Poverty, chastity, obedience. Like they're practicing death in advance. And they would say, and if they're honest, they would say, I'll have less suffering in my life. And I'm like, oh, then you are doing it wrong. I think every version in which we are so terrified we will lose it all, like that is so
totally
that has to be, to me, like the knowledge. That's the bit where, like, because they're suffering, then we know we have to be people of great courage. I'm like, I want to be near that person, not the one who's like, actually my life is about suffering management. Thank you.
I think I have that reaction sometimes to Buddhism, which I'm totally drawn to. And then once they get to detachment, I'm like, yeah, but not with people, right? And they're like, no, with people. I'm like, well, that's dumb. That's totally stupid. Like, what do you want me to be detached from my dad? You want me to be detached from Georgia and Claire? Like, what's the point? Like that totally crashes into my deepest belief, which is that the connection is all. I
also just don't think we can game it. I don't think that we can outthink it or outmaneuver it, whatever it is, or I guess the threat of suffering maybe.
Right.
But it's inevitable. We're here. Yeah. This is it. It's happening. Like, and resistance to it, I think, is really, it leads to more problems.
Yeah. Right.
So I do think that, I mean, again, this is me, the like person who's been in therapy forever, but trying to identify what the conflict is or what the source of agitation is, what the fear is, and then moving into it and through it is kind of like the only way. And again, if you feel like you have agency, then great. Then you can be in an active exploratory mode with that, and
the gaming is so interesting that you put it that way, because for me, it takes me to like the charlatans who are standing on stages with their head mics talking about basically how to game it.
Right.
Where it's like, I'm going to tell you some things, you're going to write them down, and for 5 minutes, you're going to buy into this idea that you can dodge it.
Right.
Because you followed my 5-step plan. Like, that's like so insane. Like, why don't, and it's so cruel. It's a cruel idea to put out there for people, because when you're young and you're looking for outs and you're looking for something to hold on to, and if you're not part of a religion and you don't have some kind of commandments to live by, and then this person's up there parading around, saying it so well. I just saw somebody do it at something, and they were so good. Like they almost had me. And then I was like, you know better, Kelly Corrigan.
Right.
You know that you can't sidestep this. Like, don't buy into that. But man, we were thousands of people. Like, I had to go after him, and I was like, they're going to hate my talk. Because this guy gave him like this 1, 2, 3.
Yes, he did.
And I'm going to get up there and say,
I mean, there are tricks that are helpful, sure. And and we've discovered them along the way. Like, I know now that exercise is better. I'm much better for it. And if I eat a green thing, I am going to be in a better mental and emotional state. These, and that's
talking. I mean, having a best friend to talk to.
Sure. I mean, I'm so grateful that I got to a point where I have a few tools that I know how to use, but it doesn't inure me from agitation, anxiety, despair, envy. But it does make me more able to observe those negative feelings as they appear and not be so owned by them. Right?
Yes.
Go, oh, right, it's this one. Okay, I'm in the shit again.
That's age.
Yeah.
Like when I look at my girls who are just, it's all new. It's so new. And I think, don't worry.
Right.
Like you'll just get more used to like the slings and arrows. You get more used to the ride.
Right.
And you won't be so nauseated by it.
Yeah.
You'll be like, you'll recognize it.
Right.
it doesn't dissolve all the emotions.
Yeah,
but
and
you'll
it's tricky
be able
because
to
there's
them.
an element of detachment, but not really.
Right.
I mean, you can't avoid it. You can just take some comfort as you're in it. You know, that it will actually evolve into another state.
I spent my 20s interviewing televangelists for this book.
Amazing.
And then I spent my
right?
30s interviewing women religious celebrities. And then so far, late 30s, early 40s, I've been really into interviewing wellness influencers, and which is all of a kind.
Yep.
And the tools versus cures. I do really,
That's a good
I
distinction.
really believe that more and more. Because I've been reading hundreds and hundreds of self-help books because I've been writing a history of self-help. And I do find that there are so many strategies just for managing our bodies and our mental states and our families. And I love the idea, okay, I really should create some kind of ecology to live inside that makes sense. Thank you. 5 steps to et cetera, et cetera. But it's the implication and not implication, the promise of solving the problem of being a person that I can feel the lurch of my little heart toward it all the time. And then I'm like, that's it. I know it's bullshit.
I know who you are.
Yet the fact that it's compelling has been the reason why I keep studying it.
Yeah.
Okay, I have 2 more questions for this time. One is, sometimes when I read C.S. Lewis, I get a little tingly. And I don't want to. I don't want to believe any of that. And I also feel that way a little bit about Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's mentioned in the book. She's the braiding sweetgrass woman. And she's the one who asked the question that was yet another question I'd never asked myself, which is, are we more special, we human beings, than all other creatures? And it was like, I don't really want to worry that one through. What if we aren't? God, what does that mean? And then the other one that sort of scares me to really try on his ideas are Peter Singer and the utilitarians who are give until it hurts. Don't buy another pair of shoes for the rest of your life. But why would you? I have so many. And I certainly will never need another pair, and all of that could go to somebody else. And there are people without shoes. It's so basic. Is there any belief in the book that you were like, oh, don't get in there. I don't want to change my whole life?
Those are 2 good ones.
Listeners, you should just see their faces right now. They're both
It's full quizzical and
head tilted. Don't even make me say it, or I might start to believe it.
Yeah, I think the stuff that gets me to is the how big should be your community of obligation, because I do find it difficult to maintain even my own standards of, I really just got to be able to exercise and eat normally and have my own obligations without feeling weird about that. And that, I think, has come with age. I feel like I hit 40 and I was like, wait a minute, I could just block off time. People will be mad, but then I won't deteriorate. Has anyone really put that together before? So
come to my seminar. It costs $38.99.
Not open deterioration. But I do think that the feeling that there are more and more people with any kind of comfort could come a greater community, and that I feel beholden to, financially, emotionally, how many causes should I care about?
Right.
And mostly that makes me just wonder, the limits of my own, not the limits of empathy, but my own limits to understand and be able to invest in certain issues. I really only feel like I understand 3 issues very well, and everything else just party favors.
What are your 3 issues?
Anything to do with religion, I am tip top. I am, since the dawn of time, man has sought. I'm PowerPoint presentations. I'm really good. Yeah, I'm great on.
That's a big one.
Yeah, thank you.
That's really good. You could live off that forever.
Thank you. I a lot of commitments to certain, to organized religion in particular, that I feel like I got going on. Healthcare, I'm really obsessed with. And I only have 2 issues, so that's it. The list really broke down after religion. I mean, it was just 1. So
a thing that I really liked about this book is that for sure it opened my field of vision. There are limits to our imagination, and there are limits to what we and the people we surround ourselves think about and talk about. And so I felt like I was dipping myself in totally different waters.
Yeah.
Well, I think that all of the propositions on offer here could be seen as threatening. and problematic if you dial them up to 11, right? And most of them are presented as absolutes because,
that's how you make a name for yourself in this world.
Yeah. But I think they're probably all more connected than not. I mean, I was with my parents recently in LA because I had a little work trip before I came here, and I was talking about this book and doing this podcast, and my dad said, well, just imagine, Trump reading this book, and like what that, and that's probably a good thing, right? And I was like, Trump would not make it 3 pages in, like 3 sentences in. Yeah. Trump would not touch this book. I mean, okay, so I'm making, got political here, but if you're wrestling with this stuff at all, you're probably in good shape. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I thought it was. I find Buddhism a little scary for the reasons that we were just talking about, because I am so invested in like the deeply interpersonal stuff. I mean, that is what defines my everything. So the suggestion that I should maybe make another choice is really upsetting. But I don't think that's what they mean exactly. But you can extrapolate. I mean, you really do realize that there are so many different cultures that have very different ways of perceiving this world and moving through it. And, this idea of the way, we're so individualistic in our culture. That's totally. It's so wildly alien to us.
Yeah.
So I say that there's a, point of connection for all of these different approaches and disciplines. And then so you have to honor that. And you also have to honor, the reality of those differences. And I have friends from Asian cultures who, we're in midlife now, and they're now moving cross country to be closer to their aging parents, or they're making really meaningful sacrifices in their own life. They're not doing the work that feels like a calling to them because they are,
because there's a greater calling.
There's a greater calling, which I don't have.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't instilled in me.
Yeah. Right.
And who's the better person, right?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
Right. Yeah.
And actually, my mom has talked about these friends of mine, and she's upset by that idea. Like,
she is.
Yeah, he's a writer. He should be writing, not, moving, to X place to be close to his mom who needs him. And so she's telling me something in that. That's right.
That's
so
right.
She's saying, when I get to that point, don't you dare hover and sacrifice your own vitality, for my benefit. But so anyway, these are knotty problems.
They are. I was thinking about when they talked about Buddhism, and they said that when Siddhartha, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Siddhartha.
Okay, Siddhartha.
This is her realm.
I know. I was looking to Kate. Oh, Almighty Kate. Yes, she can pronounce all the names. But anyway, he left his kid. And then the kid when he came back, the kid said, okay, all right, like, give me my inheritance. Yeah. And he was like, I would never give you your inheritance. That would be a total obstacle and impediment to your growth. And in fact, like, the kid's name means impediment.
Oh, wow.
And so it was super intense, like running with the idea of detachment.
Yeah.
But it did bring to mind like this idea of fame and fortune being impediments to a life worth living.
Yeah.
Did you buy that?
Not really. Also, he abandoned his kid. I was so distressed by that.
Me too.
And so many of these enlightened folks are men. Can you imagine a woman pursuing walking enlightenment, and abandoning her child? Yeah. Like, what? How would that be allowed?
It's like Kramer versus Kramer. Fleischman is in trouble. It's like, what are you doing? You are like a whore.
Yeah. So anyway,
there is like the most popular book in the English language was Pilgrim's Progress, like other than the Bible. And there's
never heard of it.
Have you either?
Thank you.
What?
No. I have no idea what you're talking about. Who are you?
John Bunyan wrote a book called Pilgrim's Progress, where this guy goes on, his name Christian, huge allegory, goes on a journey, and he is trying to get to heaven, basically. And but this is where the term Vanity Fair comes from. It's like one of the distractions along the way.
Keep going on.
Wow.
Making me feel really smart right now. Thank you. And it's this story of a person trying to overcome obstacles inside themselves, and they're personified. And so like sloth and whatever, they're all people who are tempting him along the way. And then there are some people who help and some people who hold you back. And, but the bit that always got me is in the first like 3 sentences of the book, he leaves his family. Like he's going on a journey, and in the journey he leaves something behind. And in that version, I could never imagine any form of growth that wasn't just not even like oriented by my loves, but just me trying to like carry all my loves with me. Right. I mean, that is one very compelling version, for instance, of like Mormon views of heaven, is they have the celestial families and people who are together forever. And people always like sidle up to me at things and are like, hey, weren't you a little bit more interested in the version where I can guarantee you'll be with your kid forever and ever? And I'm like, thank you for your pamphlet. I'm like my mom. I'm slightly less convinced by pamphlets. But I've always been tempted by versions that kind of help me remember how sacred my loves feel when I'm close to them.
I think that is so interesting. This is yet another thing I never thought of. Is that like none of these stories are women saying like, I am leaving my children,
Goodbye.
My impediments behind, and I'm going to, it's like that Ann Tyler book where she's walking on the beach and then she just keeps walking. And it's like so eye-popping. The whole thrill of the book is like, God, what would happen?
It's a serious taboo. And, and I've played it out on Homeland, Fleischman. Like, I'm really, really interested in that idea because women aren't allowed to, they're barely allowed to go to the freaking grocery store.
Right.
Or
the bathroom. My kids used to follow me in the bathroom and be touching my naked thighs while I went to the bathroom.
And you're supposed to love every second.
And the shorthand for that, I feel like just because I heard it like 10 times this week, because they go, especially if they're ambitious and they have an interesting life, then they have to go, and I never missed a game. I'm like, well, one, that's kind of a weird barometer for like, maybe because like that, you're not the person they want to come talk to, or you're not the, why isn't it like, I'm an important, emotionally safe person for my child. You have to go watch them do something in which they're not interacting with you. And that's the primary litmus test for parenthood. I thought that was so odd. But we like say things that try to say in the shortest possible way, they suffered nothing.
That's right.
And like, that is just, it's just not true. Every love is like pulling from something, borrowing here and not paying back. And that's how love works.
So I wondered if, people used to say, I want my child to be a good person. They've said, I want my child to be happy. I think our values are often reflected in how we would finish that sentence.
Right.
I want my child to be. So how would you finish that sentence?
I guess I always wanted compassion. I want my kid to be compassionate. So he has 2 sets of grandparents, and one is a tough it out one, and one is the other kind. And he tripped and hurt himself, and he said, "But Mom," he was so concerned about it. But he was like, "But Mom, they didn't come running." And like that when you're hurt, that like the grandparent was supposed to literally just drop their shopping bags and come sprinting toward him. And I had to be like, oh, no, they also love you in all these other ways. I promise they don't. This is not evidence of their not love. But I did like the fact that some kind of open, intense compassion was, he was like, I'm pretty sure this is how I know. And so I think that's probably my number one. I want my kid to be so compassionate.
I guess I would wish engagement for my kids. I want them to be plugged in. I want them to be committed to some kind of practice that thrills, excites, and challenges and scares them, right? I want them to feel like their lives have weight and purpose and meaning and focus. I want them to be striving towards something that they are really curious about, you know? So yeah, I think that. And I want them to have friends.
Yes.
I really want them to be in community, like in relationship. I want them to think of themselves as good friends and, to know that that's important and something to invest in.
Some of the calmest, happiest moments for me have been when somehow I've been able to eavesdrop on a conversation between Georgia and her BFF or Claire and her BFF. Like either they're Zooming and so it's loud so I can hear it, or they're in the other room together.
Yeah.
And I it's just like I'm awash in calm. I'm like, that's it. As long as you know how to do that. As long as you know how to love and be loved, everything, you're going to be all right.
That's right. I also, when I was pregnant with Cyrus, I would say like, well, yeah, I want them to be happy and healthy and all that, but I really want them to be funny.
Totally.
And they're funny. They're both legit, objectively funny.
Yeah.
Like they get the joke. They know how to make a joke.
Yeah,
they understand.
huge.
And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
Like I'm amused by them and they're amused by life, so that's another one that we'll add to the list. Like they get the joke.
Yeah, totally. We in our family we say funny always wins.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And what we mean is that like if you get in trouble and then you can funny your way out of it, or if you're begging for something and you can funny your way into like the $5.
Rowan just did a
Funny
very
always
literal.
wins.
So Rowan has been misbehaving this week. And it's Rowan,
shape up.
Yep. It's been hard. It's been tough. It was a bad one, a bad weekend. And I actually was out of town. Sorry, Hugh. But it was at the end of a particularly arduous day, and Rowan knew that he had been transgressing. And he said to Hugh, like, "You're mad at me, aren't you?" And he said, "I'm not. It's fine, And then he put those Groucho Marx glasses on with the honking nose, and Hugh couldn't help but laugh. And then Ron kept doing it. He said, "That is my superpower."
Thanks, girls. That was awesome.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
So fun. Here are my takeaways from my conversation with Kate Bowler and Claire Danes. Number 1, envy, that most miserable of feelings, has everything to do with how fulfilled we are in our own lives. Number 2, the way to identify where your envy is coming from is to think about a day where you might hear the same fact about another person and think good for them, and then try to figure out what's the difference between that day and this one. Number 3, rest, reprieve, safety are necessary but low-growth states. Number 4, pain is oppressive, and when we are freed from it, it's damn near spiritual. There's something glorious about the reminder that good health is not a guaranteed state. Number 5, ask yourself, what is your favorite emotional state? Surprise, discovery, connection, release. And then create practices to get more of that feeling in your life. Number 6, try as we might, we will not be able to outmaneuver suffering. Number 7, in any situation, however trying, the goal is to find some area of agency so that we can act. Number 8, every act of love pulls from something. It borrows here and pays back there. That's how love works. Number 9, our hope for our kids is that they're compassionate, engaged, capable of giving and receiving love. But the main thing, if we're being honest, is we hope that they're funny, because funny always wins. Thank you to Claire Danes and Kate Bowler for being such great company and companions as we work through this book. Thank you to the authors of Life Worth Living, A Guide to What Matters Most. That's Miroslav Volf, Matthew Croasmun, and Ryan McAnnally-Linz. Thanks to the Yale Divinity School, the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, and Evan Rosa. Special thanks to the Warren Smoot Carter III and Megan Carter Charitable Fund. Thanks to Jessica Ritchie and also the team at Kelly Corrigan Wonders. That's technical producer Dean Kateri, executive producer Tammy Stedman, our graphic designer Gagi, and the 2 great women who help us engage with our audience, Charlie Upchurch and Rachel Hicks. Finally, Thanks to all of you for listening and sharing. You can always reach our team with feedback and suggestions. Our email is hello@kellycorrigan.com. We'll be back on Friday with a new For the Good of the Order, and on Sunday with a new Thanks for Being Here. Join us again next time for another conversation, a final conversation with Claire Danes and Kate Bowler about what makes a life truly worth living. Until then, I'll see you on Instagram @Kelly Corrigan.
For the Life of the World is a production of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture at Yale Divinity School. This episode featured Kelly Corrigan, Kate Bowler, and Claire Danes. Special thanks to Tammy Stedman and Kelly Corrigan, as well as the Warren Smoot Carter III and Megan Carter Charitable Fund. Production assistance by Macy Bridge and Caitlin Young. For more information about Life Worth Living, visit lifeworthlivingbook.com. And for more information about the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, you can visit us online at faith.yale.edu. It's the end of the show here, and if you're following along with the book, that's wonderful, but have you considered giving this book to a friend? This is the kind of thing that's probably best discussed with others. So go buy another copy of the book and spread a little life worth living. Thanks for listening today.